Awesome. Welcome everybody to our first ever Florida climate chat. And so I'm super excited to get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started here. All right. Is everybody able to see the slide deck? Hopefully that is a yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Awesome. So if you don't know where you are at the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida's new monthly event called Florida Climate Chat. We are going to be rolling out these events so that we can bring information to our membership base all across the state. Various chapters have given feedback that they don't always have experts in various fields around climate science, policy, etc. And so we are doing these calls in order to have a virtual way to bring all of our members together, all of our chapter presidents together, and have presentation discussions on various climate related information. So super excited to launch this event. And I just wanted to go ahead and let you know that John might be popping in a little later today. He was working super late last night, but we have an awesome president. Go ahead and if everybody could please mute, I would greatly appreciate that. We have an awesome president, John Capice, who has been just an amazing leader in the community. And if you haven't heard from him or met him, please go ahead and reach out to him on the website. You'll find our contact form. It goes straight to our president. He is just a wealth of knowledge, and we would love to highlight his great work. Probably on the next call, we'll give him a section to present on some of the awesome things that he's been doing globally. So super excited about that. And as you know, Florida needs us now more than ever. So the Environmental Caucus, we have a very important mission of recruiting future environmentally focused candidates, doing candidate recruitment and education for existing legislators. We recognize the importance of making sure that the electorate is engaged on environmental issues, and not everybody is an expert on climate. And so this is a super important opportunity by being a member of the Environmental Caucus, not just to educate your community, not just to educate future candidates, but also existing lawmakers, and making sure that we are holding those accountable who are not legislating based on the priorities of the environment and of their constituents. So that's where the Environmental Caucus comes in. We do have several committees that we are constantly recruiting for. I run, and I'll do a little introduction on myself here in a minute, but I run the communications committee. We have an endorsement program that we're rolling out right now with an awesome candidate wraparound resource incubator to help candidates understand climate related issues with talking points, etc. So if you want to be a part of our endorsement committee or our candidate recruitment committee, please let us know, visit our website. We have awesome leaders, but we need more help because we want to really build out these programs. So if you're interested in getting involved with supporting our chapters or doing some really important climate storytelling through the communications role, please feel free to sign up on our website, environmentalcaucus.com. Also, if you're in an area that does not have a chapter, we are recruiting chapter presidents. So if you know anybody who lives in any of these counties listed here on this PowerPoint, and they would be interested in launching a chapter, they don't have to be afraid because we have wraparound resources for chapter presidents and a pretty decent budget as well, which is rare for caucuses, as you know. So we are super excited to announce that we have some funding to support our chapters, and we really want to help get a chapter in every county. So feel free to reach out to us if you see a chapter on this list and you have a friend or you know someone who would like to start a chapter in one of these counties. All right, so that brings me to, we have a hand. Colleen, did you want to go ahead and quickly ask a question? We are recording, just letting you all know. Okay. All right, so my name's Lee Perry. I am the new communications chair for the Democratic Environmental Caucus. And this is a really awesome opportunity to bring people together and to talk about our communications needs. And what exactly is my role? Well, I do a lot from branding uniformity across all the chapters, revamping the website inside out, making sure that every committee has all of the tools and resources, op-eds, talking points, social media graphics, whatever they need. I've kind of been recruited by John at the end of last year to step in and support at the state level, because this is kind of one of those areas of focus that folks had the hardest time with across the state. And so I do office hours at 4 o'clock on Fridays for all of our chapters or candidates that we've recruited that need help with social media. And our committees meet, our communications committee meets on Thursdays at 7 p.m. We have 3 people in my committee. Imagine what we could do if we had even just 1 or 2 more people. So if you're good at any kind of communications, graphic design, video editing, writing, I'm not great at writing, but if you're great at writing, please let us know. Colleen, I saw that you came off mute. Do you want to quickly ask your question before we move on? You're still on mute, hon.
Oh, I had so much trouble getting off of mute. When you had the list, I don't know, I live in Pasco County.
Okay.
I couldn't blow it up to see if there was.
It's also all on our website. And so if you want to go ahead and go to our website, environmentalcaucus.com, and if you see a chapter or you don't see a chapter that you would like to, get more involved with, please go ahead and reach out through the website. We would love to engage you on that
Okay,
level.
thank you.
Thank you. We do have a new website. So I don't know if you saw the Environmental Caucus's website last year, but you're going to see a lot of information from last year added to this new rendition of the website. But it is now way more pretty and there's way more details. This is an ever evolving project, so there's going to be a lot more edits as we go. But please take a look at the Environmental Caucus's website, and we're super excited to showcase the new beautiful and functional website for all of the Environmental Caucus's needs. So we also are rolling out a brand new legislative scorecard. So if you go to environmentalcaucus.com/scorecard, you'll see these really detailed overviews of how each legislator voted on each bill. And then you can actually click view voting record and take a look at all of the bills that our committee decided were a top priority for the caucus and how each legislator voted. So this is a really awesome tool for folks that want to take a look at our state legislature and view their voting record, and just, be able to get the word out in your own community, or reach out to your legislator directly and let them know that you are happy or upset with how they voted on certain issues. So it really helps us educate folks on environmental specific policy, and how their state legislators are representing them or not. And of course, as I mentioned, some of you just recently joined, we have a survey that I'm throwing in the chat. If you all could please fill out this survey, this is going to be our opportunity to learn from you how you think the Environmental Caucus of Florida at the state level can improve. We'd love to hear your feedback on, not just that, but also future events that you would like to, have us organize for you, future speakers you would like us to recruit. If you're a chapter president, if you have members in your local community that have questions about something, let us know so that we can find an expert in that subject matter to come and speak on that particular issue. So please fill out the survey so it can inform us on future climate chats. And now I get the honor of introducing our first speaker for our first Florida Climate Chat, Scott Thomasson. Welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for being here. And I would love for you to give a little brief introduction on who you are, and we can go ahead and kick it off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Lee said, my name's Scott Thomasson. I run a energy consulting and lobbying shop out of Tallahassee called Sunbelt Strategies. I'm also a lawyer, although not in Florida, but I do work for the solar industry and nonprofits around the Southeast. I've sort of worked in every state capital, and before that in DC on Capitol Hill. And again, so I work with Lee in Florida. I work, do legislative and for a bunch of nonprofits that work together as a coalition. And that's my focus here. I also work with the solar industry here in Florida and in other states, and with a couple local governments on their clean energy initiatives. So with that background, I'll say, Lee's setup of offering you all some issue experts. I am an expert in the energy silo. I don't pretend to be an expert in conservation or environmental issues, or the Everglades or mangrove bills or those, but I do know about energy very deeply. I practiced before public service commissions on energy and utility regulation. So the bills I'm going to cover are mostly energy related, or energy and climate, as that's been a theme this session in particular. I'm going to hit a couple key bills that you've probably seen in the news, so that we can sort of talk about what those bills really do and what's in them, as opposed to what some of the headlines kind of caricature them to be. And I'm going to move pretty quickly through that and hit some themes that we've seen at the legislature for the last, say, 3 or 4 sessions that have led us to where we are with those bills. And I'm going to also not, try to move kind of quickly since we're saving Q&A. I would much rather go have questions as we go along, but understand since we're recording that I'm going to, hurry through my portion of the presentation so that we can have a back and forth about all this, because I think that's going to be a little more useful. So with that, I will get started. So the bills that I think have made the biggest headlines as DeSantis has been signing bills over the last few weeks are what we are calling the energy omnibus, because it has so many things in it. The technical title of this bill was energy resources, but it hits so many things, as you'll see in a couple slides, that we call it an omnibus. And this was sponsored by Bobby Payne in the House, and Jay Collins from Tampa in the Senate, both Republicans. This is what you've seen most of the headlines about, DeSantis striking climate from Florida, the books of Florida law. And we'll talk about what that means, both practically and symbolically, because it's sort of important on both levels. Second, I'm going to talk about a bill that I worked a lot on with Lee and some other folks that preempts EV charging station regulation, part of a broader theme that the Florida legislature loves preempting local governments these days. And this one went through without any modification, although it did get some opposition from Democrats in both houses. And that was part of an agriculture bill that Jay Collins was also the sponsor of, along with Danny Alvarez in the House. And then the other big preemption bill this session was HB 433, which began as a heat exposure preemption to address some South Florida regulations for worker safety, for workplace safety, for heat exposure, and ended up with a lot more stuff in it, including sort of local minimum wage regulations that preempted. I'm not going to go into depth on that one, but I can answer questions about it. I don't have a slide on that one, but you know, some of our folks that we work with worked on it. So it's but it's made the headline, so I want to make sure we have that on the list. All right, next one. Okay, so the energy omnibus. This is actually like what I judiciously fit on one slide from this bill. It does so many things. I've got like a much longer document that sort of has all these things that I'm still filling out because there's so much in this bill. But this is the one you've read about that made national headlines in the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN, that Governor DeSantis strikes climate from Florida laws. It's true. The bill does strike the word climate and the use of climate as a criterion for the Office of Energy and for what's called the Department of Management Services, which oversees government procurement. These were both Crist era, so this would be 2008, 2009. Florida did a bunch of climate-friendly and renewable-friendly laws. It also included some rebate programs for solar and efficiency, most notably a rooftop solar rebate that kind of had a rocky history at the Energy Office. But a lot of this climate stuff was sort of not really seriously implemented anyway in Florida, I would say. You know, it was passed during Governor Crist's administration, but once Rick Scott came in I think 2010, if I'm correct, those laws sort of sat idle and I think dormant to a large extent. Some of the programs that had started, like the solar rebate program, played themselves out, but a lot of those were really shelved and not implemented, including procurement stuff especially. There were a lot of procurement rules that I can give examples in the Q&A if people are interested, that, you know, really just weren't being implemented for over a decade. This was also the big wind ban, I think is probably the other headline you've seen from this one, that DeSantis bans wind turbines in Florida. And so the ban applies to state waters, which are, you know, a couple miles out between the coast, between the shoreline and federal waters. There's, you know, Florida state waters. So it's not banned in federal waters, but some folks are reading the language to say you can't run a line out to federal waters either through state waters. So it effectively does ban wind. This was also kind of symbolic because no one is building wind in Florida. It doesn't work well here. Solar obviously works really well, but we just don't have the kind of consistent strong winds that places like Texas and Oklahoma and Iowa have. Some other things that have not been covered as much. The bill loosens in a few different places some regulations on natural gas pipelines, and how utilities can recover costs for those natural gas pipelines, in particular, moving them, relocating them, which sounds very specific and narrow, but you know, can add up to some real money that could be increases on gas bills. It also expands what the bill calls resiliency facilities, which are these local natural gas storage facilities, and says that local governments can't play a role in where they're sited. And if you know anything about siting natural gas storage, it's flammable and compressed and pretty dangerous if something goes wrong. So the idea that a local government, local community wouldn't have any say in where these facilities are located was disturbing to a lot of folks during session. But again, another sort of expansion for the natural gas industry. It expanded some preemptions that I'm going to talk about from past sessions that keep that already apply to local governments, and that say you can't restrict a homeowner's ability to get natural gas from a utility or any other energy source. Basically, you can't have like 100% clean mandate that bans natural gas, and that it applies that to HOAs and to residential housing developments too. So it's you know, building on a theme that we've seen for a couple years. Requires the Public Service Commission to hold hearings before utilities retire existing generation plants, which are all fossil fuel run. So this is sort of a Trump era kind of thing that I think probably came from Bobby Payne as the sponsor, but is sort of the story that we need these fossil fuels for reliability, and that the state needs to take a tough look at whether we should shut them down. And it's really meant as an anti-Biden administration type of thing, to make sure that we're not shutting down plants because of EPA regulations, you know, which is sort of a fight that the governor would probably like to pick. It actually has some positive language in there about expanding utilities' EV charging programs. This has been a fight that's been quietly happening at the legislature for a couple sessions between the gas stations and the utilities over who gets to, you know, compete fairly for the EV charging market. So this is sort of compromise language about the way that the utilities get to play in that market, and how much they do or don't get to charge their customers for doing that. And then you'll also see in these articles about this bill at the end, usually it mentions that the bill includes studies for expanding nuclear in Florida and for expanding hydrogen. Both of those are just study language. It just says the PSC will report to the legislature on advanced nuclear, and the Department of Transportation will look into hydrogen fuel. Both of those legislators were pretty excited about in hearings, even when they were talking about how renewables cost too much, they were not bothered by the costs of new nuclear or hydrogen, which are sort of both nascent technologies, sort of early stage and not cheap yet at all. But we're leaning in on those, even though they're more expensive than the renewable than wind that we're banning. So that's, you know, I think the highlights. I could do 3 more slides like this on this bill because there's other stuff in there. But I'll save that for the Q&A, and I'll talk in a minute about how this bill fits into the sort of context of what the legislature's been doing for the past couple sessions. Before that, on the next slide, I'll hit real quick the EV charging station bill. This is simple because it's a very short section in this bill, and it's very strong language that says local governments can't enact or enforce any EV charging ordinances and regulations. There's some wiggle room there that doesn't say like you have to get rid of programs that are on the books, but you can't enforce them. So some local governments are asking questions about what that means, and whether they can sort of have some rules on EVs that maybe don't require enforcement. But that's probably going to get settled in a rulemaking. The Department of Agriculture is going to have a rulemaking to decide what the statewide rules are going to be. This bill, actually, if you saw headlines about it, they were probably about cultivated meat, because the governor and one of the sponsors love talking about banning fake meat in Florida, and that got a lot more press attention than the EV charging did. But there was actually a climate angle to that too, because Governor DeSantis in his press release said he's trying to stop, the woke mob, the global elites, from forcing everyone to eat insects and cultivated meat instead of, honest to goodness Florida cattle. So it was, he's playing that up as another sort of anti-woke thing. So he loved the cultivated meat ban even more than EV charging. Let's see, what do I have next? Lee. Bills that failed. Actually, these are sort of in my other list of trends mostly, but there was a bill we've had for 2 sessions to expand the use of what's called renewable natural gas, which is usually biogas from either landfills or manure digesters on farms, at least the way the bills are written. I can also include water treatment facilities and some other things that cities are interested in. But that bill, 2 sessions, has failed, and we can talk about why in the Q&A. A couple preemption bills that again bring up this sort of the governor's interest in stopping ESG as part of his anti-woke and anti-climate stuff. But they were both targeted at MPOs. And for those who aren't familiar, these are metropolitan planning organizations that are usually tied to counties or a group of counties that are sort of a hybrid between state and federal planning and work with both the U.S. Department of Transportation and FDOT. And the U.S. DOT has a bunch of new climate rules under Biden that the DeSantis administration doesn't like. So they were telling local planners, you can't use climate considerations or ESG or equity or environmental concerns or anything related to the Paris Agreement. It mentioned specifically because one of the Biden rules included the Paris Agreement. So it was definitely about that. But that did not end up passing. That it sort of moved through the House, but the Senate never took it up. And we can talk about that more if folks are interested. A couple more things that didn't pass. There's been an attempt for a couple sessions to put a new tax on EV owners. It would be an annual tax of about $200, rising to $250. I think it depends on the type of car, but that's failed twice. It did pass the Senate at least once. Yeah, the first year it passed. But that one stopped, and another one that didn't pass was a bill targeted at municipal utilities. So this is like OUC in Orlando, for those of you in that area, JEA in Jacksonville, Tallahassee Utilities, some of the other cities that own their utilities. There were different versions of this bill, but the one we've seen move put a cap on the city budgeting and ability to get revenues from those utilities. So it's basically a budgeting preemption for the cities that the cities showed up and showed strong opposition to. So that bill has come up 2 sessions in a row and drawn a lot of attention from local governments. So I'll see what's next, Lee. Okay, so how does this fit into themes we've seen from in the legislature, and how are these bills sort of culminating these things? I'll go into detail on each one of these real quickly, and then we'll get to Q&A. Preemption of local governments is a theme across pretty much all issues. I know those of you who work on environmental issues have seen it in other areas besides energy. I mean, down to sunscreen and plastic straws and all kinds of things that we've seen in Florida. We also saw electric leaf blowers get preempted this session, snuck into the budget. Expanding natural gas markets. Florida actually doesn't have a lot of residential natural gas. It's about 9 or 10% last time I looked at the number, but it's growing a lot. And the natural gas industry is showing up every session, passing bills that help that expansion. Again, this theme of anti-ESG, anti-climate, anti-equity, anti-woke, anti-DEI. This, ESG is the new DEI for the DeSantis administration. So that's a theme we've seen for a couple sessions, and I think we'll continue to see a little bit. And then there's sort of an anti-EV and anti-rooftop solar that theme that come from different places, not necessarily from the governor. But we did definitely see that session pretty consistently across sessions. So I'll just go through these real quick. And again, I'm not going to go through every one of these bills, but I wanted y'all to have a list of what I think are highlights if you want to understand the trend over the last couple of years. Like, these are the bills that I think you need to be familiar with to sort of understand why people talk about preemption of natural gas or utilities services in Florida. And they'll say, oh yeah, that was passed a couple years ago. So starting in 2021, we had a couple really big energy preemption bills. One that kept local government from, I think the real purpose of it was to stop local governments from moratoriums on natural gas hookups for new construction. That was something that had been talked about in Tampa Bay and some public city council debates, and it sort of triggered the natural gas industry to come in and preempt it. The other big preemption was for fuel retailers. Basically, gas stations said, we don't want local governments telling us that we have to have EV charging stations and can't have gas because they have 100% clean energy goal. So that got preempted. So local governments can't tell gas stations anything about what fuels to sell. And then in 23, we saw a bunch of expansions. That was a big year for preemption. This gas stoves bill was one that Jay Collins, again, was the sponsor for. This was an anti-Biden thing. The EPA considered some regulations on gas stoves, and so Florida went crazy. Florida Republicans went crazy to sort of say, well, not in Florida, you don't. We're preempting anyone from banning gas stoves or regulating gas stoves in any way. And it applied to outdoor grills and all kinds of other appliances. But in fact, for a while I was calling it the Grills Gone Wild bill, because it was it didn't even have any health or safety carve outs on it. And then one, speaking of municipal utilities, Gainesville Regional Utilities was basically taken over by the state, similar to the Disney takeover, in that the governor appointed a board that now runs GRU, makes the decisions for GRU. That was a big one, and also included some ESG language. But this is one slice of a much bigger preemption story that you see every session. So usually if there's energy issues that we're worried about, we try to think of how this is going to show up as preemption in the next session if it hasn't already, because that's sort of an evergreen favorite at the legislature. So the next one, natural gas, already talked about this. The big thing, I think the two themes I'll just say really quickly are renewable natural gas. We declared that officially a renewable energy in 2021 in this bill 896. And so since then, now that it's considered renewable, the legislature has been proposing tax breaks and other incentives every session for it, with a lot of them passing pretty quietly because they get put in bigger budget packages. LNG is also something that came up, liquefied natural gas, this session, and I think we'll see more of this, and in particular, small LNG fueling stations at ports seems to be a target for this, or a target for legislation. So I would expect to see more expansion of that also. And again, it's a theme in all the preemptions as well. Touch on natural gas. So next slide, Lee. Again, the sort of anti-ESG, this does come largely, there have been a couple articles about how the governor's office lobbied on this. And so I don't really, I've already sort of talked about what happened this session, but a lot of it came from bills from last session, including that Gainesville bill had some anti-ESG language. And then there was a big bill, HB 3, that was a priority of the speaker to sort of stop woke financial institutions from running the state's investments or discriminating against, bank customers here in Florida. So that bill is sort of a source when you hear about ESG. That's where a lot of it comes from, is that HB 3 last session, in 2023. And then I think the last slide, Lee, is anti-EV and solar. The anti-EV stuff is relatively new, but we've seen a lot of it this session and last session. Again, we saw the new taxes on EV owners. There were a bill last session in 2023 that would have preempted local governments from, discriminating about the type of fuel when they buy fleet vehicles, meaning don't buy EVs. The big one in 2023 was that Governor DeSantis vetoed a bill that a lot of EV advocates worked on to encourage the state and local governments to procure more electric vehicles for their fleets. So this includes like little small cars for local code enforcement and those type of things. But that passed almost unanimously. There was only one vote against it in both houses, and folks had expected the governor to sign it, but he was deep in Iowa politics at the time and bet against EVs as a political issue and vetoed that one, and has been no looking back since then. He's gone more anti-EV since that veto. That was sort of a turning point for him. But we did see some more attempts at that. On the solar side, consumer protection has been a theme that we've seen a couple sessions in a row. And in 2023, the CFO, Jimmy Petronas, was pushing some consumer protection language that really expands on another bill that was passed a few years ago. But it's something that he's still making public comments about. Even I think last week, most recently, he had a press event about how he thinks folks are getting scammed by solar companies, and he thinks they're not following these rules. So it's sort of an ongoing theme that these consumer protection things we'll see, and we may see those on EVs too, who knows, but find a way to hit it from different angles. Of course, the net metering bill, we saw the legislature again passed with a mostly Republican majority in 2022. DeSantis vetoed that bill for reasons that were not about protecting solar. He was nervous about some language that would have raised utility rates that was also in the bill. And that's what his public statement about the veto was. But that bill will be back in some form sooner or later. The solar industry is sort of on standby waiting to see that one again. I think that's all the slides I have. And again, I try to not linger on those too long so we could do Q&A. I could just dive into get in the weeds on stuff that y'all are actually interested in.